Good evening. My name is Oscar Martinez, and today I'm going to be talking about the 7-Year War. The 7-Year War that lasted from 1754 through 1763. Okay, so this war was between England and France. So during the years of the colonies, they had a couple of encounters. They had some issues between them. France pretty much owning the top part of Canada, and obviously England owning the 13 colonies along the coast. The issue here was land. So as we know, land is equal to money, because the more land you have, the more materials, the more raw material you can generate and export and sell, so the more land you have, the more money you get. So as you see on the map here, this is the way it was distributed. So the blue part is the part that France owned at the time. So, and also as you can see, here are the 13 colonies. Okay, this is the part that Great Britain owned, which is England. Here are the territories ceded by France to Great Britain on the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713. Okay, so it's the purple parts. And also you can see Spain, which eventually moved a little bit up here. But as of the time, Spain was mostly in Mexico, some parts of Texas, over here in Florida as well. So this is how the map was displayed. So when England wanted to expand the colonies to your left, they were encountering the French and the Native Americans, which at the time were pretty good friends with the French. They had a good trading system with them. They traded fur and other components they needed. So they were good allies. So whenever the 7-Year War started, it was pretty much great. It was England and the colonies versus France and the Native Americans. There were certain times where some of the Native Americans would help out, England and the colonies, but for the most part, they were pretty close allies to France. So everything actually exploded when, on the west side of the Pennsylvania, George Washington went out there because there was a post of French people. There was a fort there. So George Washington made an attempt to bring him down, claiming that the land was from the colonies and they were trying to, I guess in a sort of way, invade, part of the Pennsylvania colony. Unfortunately, he lost most of his men on that I guess battle. He tried his best, but he lost a lot of men. So this is when everything pretty much began, when the actual war started in America. Because there was other wars. Well, it was the same war, but there were other battles going on around the world. In France, in India, in Africa. So this wasn't the only part of the world where, they were fighting each other. Actually, I guess this could be considered the First World War. But for some reason, I guess they don't consider it that big of a deal. Although it was, England and Russia, it was even involved in this. They were also fighting the French. Mostly it was because of the trading on Europe and on Asia. It was mostly trading. and in North America it was the land they were fighting. So because England was benefiting very much from the raw materials that the colonies were exporting to them, they wanted to expand. So that's when things got a little dicey over here in North America. So it started pretty bad for the colonies and for England. They lost a couple of battles there until later on in 1759 they were able to start winning a couple of battles, like Fort Ticonderoga, Fort Louisburg, and Fort Duquesne. After they won these important battles, they headed up north to Canada, Quebec. So they also won that city. So it was a very important battle that they won there, because eventually, they started not only losing this part of the world, but they also started losing in other parts of the world. One of the big components, which I'm not gonna go into much, was that England was able to make a deal with people in India, which was a big deal because they were a huge provider of silk and other things that they traded. So they pretty much cast out France, and eventually France started losing a lot of money, and because of the war and because they started losing a lot of territory. So eventually England pretty much won the war. So they signed the Treaty of Paris in 1763, which officially ended the war between the French and the British and the colonies. On this, France had to give away most of its land to England. So as you can see here on the map, these are the colonies. So this is everything that they had to give up. So I also believe that Florida was part of Spain, but England negotiated a trade for some parts down here for Florida. So eventually, all this side was territory of England and the colonies. So even though France would still have all this huge piece of land, they would eventually in the future sell it to England. So yeah, it was a big war. They were it says it. I don't know why the war is called 7-Year War when it actually lasted 9 years. So as a result of the war, when France lost, the Native Americans were I guess the people that lost the most in this conflict, because they had aided France in the war when the English people started moving west. They really didn't care about the treaty that England and France had signed. So they started having a lot of battles as well. So a lot of people killed. So they eventually got to a point where the people from England would stop heading west until they had settled their land first. So they couldn't just rush, west to settle everything. They had agreed to slowly do it to avoid major losses and conflicts. So after all this, England had a huge debt because of the war. They lost about half of their income during this time, and because they thought that the colonies were the most benefited out of this war, that decided to impose some taxes into the colonies. There were very high taxes. So this is one of the reasons why, this led to the American Revolution. This, and then among other things as well. It wasn't just the taxes imposed on them, but also they were fighting to have their own government and their own rules, and they actually started a republic. They started trying to govern themselves. So this and later on will create the tension and eventually lead to the American Revolution. So I want to thank you for your time. Have a good night.